Frank's problem. Today, the other engines were being quarantined for at least 40 days. That was why they all have orange flags to know that they're not ready for scrap. All the engines love being quarantined for at least 40 days, except for Hank. He was not happy about it, and it made him very grumpy indeed, and he couldn't bear it no longer. One day, Neville and Molly were at Marin Station with Mr. Hawkerdale for a meeting. As you all know, said Mr. Hawkerdale, with the others being quarantined and you two still in business, and if anything happens badly, you two would be quarantined. And then he turned his other attention to the two engines. Neville, I would like you to help Frank with his engine problem, and Molly, you are to make sure that every engine has their own orange flag to know that they're still quarantined. But sir, said Molly, can't I work with Neville instead? I'm sorry, Molly, said Mr. Hawkerdale, but that's all I can say. Right, he said, I'm going home. Good luck. And he walked out of the station to go home. And then Neville and Molly set off. Goodbye, Molly, said Neville. Goodbye, Neville, said Molly, and puffed off. But in the meantime, there was trouble. Kept coming out of Marin Station were two troublesome men. They were called the scrap dealers, and if any engine were not quarantined, the scrap dealers would have enough money to scrap some engines or diesels, and they were on their way to see if some engines did or did not have any orange flags. But meanwhile at the docks, Thomas and Frank were talking to Diesel and Splatter. Diesel and Splatter were teasing Frank about his engine problem. It's not funny, shouted Thomas. This is serious. And what's so important about an engine problem? Sniggered Diesel. He probably just doesn't have the same stamina as I do. Yes, I do, shouted Frank. I am the most hard-working diesel on Sodor. You'll see soon enough. Yeah, said Thomas. Don't underestimate Frank. Oh, really? Said Diesel and sniffed. He had some business to take care of. Splatter, he said. You go and help Dodge at the smelter's yard. I'm going to check if any engine hasn't been quarantined. Yes, Diesel, said Splatter. What if you need help? No, I'll go alone. You set off for now. And with that, Diesel set off to find some unquarantined engines, and Splatter was off to help Dodge at the smelter's yard. Anyway, said Hank. Anyway, said Thomas. Neville's going to help you with your engine problem when he takes you to the works. I'm going to find Mr. Hawkerdale and take him home. Goodbye. And Thomas puffed away. And Frank, with his engine making strange noises, had to diesel away out of the docks on his own. Until after that, Frank was still slowly moving when he found Neville at a siding. Hello, Frank, said Neville. I've heard about your engine. Isn't it bad? It is, said Frank. I don't feel very well. I can see that, said Neville. Don't worry. Don't worry, I'll shunt you to the works. But for now, we need to get our jobs done. But Frank was still not happy about this. Don't worry, said Neville. I'll do your jobs, and then we can go to the works. And so Neville shunted Frank. And was ready for work. But still Frank was not feeling well for his own jobs. But when they got back to the docks, Neville still helped Frank with Frank's work, while Frank's driving fireman gave Frank a good polish. This helped a little, but poor Frank was still poorly. Frank was able to move one bit, but he was still tempting not to break his engine. Don't worry, said Neville. I'm sure after this quarantine business is over, you'll go to the works. Well, I do hope the Fat Controller can fix me up again soon, hoped Frank, and he had a deep feeling in his boiler that the Fat Controller might mend him soon enough. But in the meantime, Molly arrived back at the sheds, and there was Hank. He already had an orange flag because he needed an overhaul for his examination. That's odd, replied Molly. Hank is all alone in the sheds, and then it happened. She saw Hank taking down his orange flag, and it was on the turntable. Wow. Hey, could you give me a ball? I want to leave now. Oh, no, thank you, said Molly with fright. I was just passing by, that's all. Goodbye. And then Molly puffed out to the sheds, knowing that Hank didn't want to be quarantined for at least 40 days. I don't like being quarantined for 40 days. I've never been clear. Ugh. And by the time Molly witnessed Hank's anger, she raced up. She had already raced out of the sheds and onto a siding. She was very scared. She was about to go to Mr. Hawkydale's for help when... Oh, they're all never clear. They're all quarantined. Said Diesel when he noticed Molly. Molly, what are you doing here at the Signet area? Nothing, said Molly nervously. Well, you look like you weren't quarantined. What on earth were you doing at the sheds? Well, said Molly, I don't think, she said, and she told her secret about Diesel, about Hank. Secret? I thought that if there was a secret, you would tell me. What secret about Hank? But Molly didn't answer. But just then, Neville and Frank arrived. Hello, Molly, said Neville. What's wrong? Nothing, said Molly. I just seen that Hank's not been quarantined. Molly, said Neville. You didn't go alongside, did you? No, of course not, said Molly. It seems that Hank's orange flag has went down, so that means he's not quarantined, she gulped. Then Diesel knew her plan. Oh, really? So So this secret was all about Hank, isn't it? I see. He's mine now. And Diesel trundled away. No, he's not, said Neville, and raced after Diesel. Come back, shouted Frank, but it was too late. And with that, poor Neville couldn't catch Diesel because of how fast he was. And then there was trouble. He heard a bang and a clatter. Frank had wasted all of his engine trying to get to Neville and Diesel, and then he grinds to a halt. And Frank's engine was broken. Oh no, what you've done to your engine, said Molly when she was trying to catch Frank. But Frank looked serious. Neville, she said, don't you even take any notice to Diesel, he said. If you and Molly were any word towards Hank, you two would have been quarantined. So you have saved our lives, said Molly. She has, said Neville. And now that means we're not quarantined. Oh, thank goodness for that, went Molly as she breathed a sigh of relief. And then Diesel arrived at the sheds, backing towards Hank. Hello, Hank. I'm here to take you. Yes, please be quick, please. So Diesel buffered up to Hank. He was about to set off when the manager arrived. Oi, Hank, you broke the walls, and that's 3 times you broke. But I'm afraid you're still quarantined. But it's not my fault, sir, shouted Diesel. Well, that's bad luck for you, Diesel, he said. And as for you, Hank, get your quarantine flag up right now. The yard manager's good tell-off won, and there was nothing that Diesel could do. After the chasing and rattling, both Molly, Neville and Frank waited patiently for Mr. Hawkerdale or the Fat Controller. Just then, Thomas arrived, and this time on board him was Mr. Hawkerdale. And Thomas saw the situation and stopped. Oh dear, Frank, said Thomas. Your engine's destroyed. I know, said Frank, and there's nothing I could do. Then the 4 engines heard a group of voices and men walking. There, in front of Frank, were the scrap dealers. Oh, he's not... Oh, look at poor Frank, they all said. He's not been quarantined. Yeah, what do you think? We can sell him for cheap scrap, and he will make an addition to our fine scrap from the scrapyard. Both Molly and Neville nearly cried. No, don't do this, they shouted. Then the Fat Controller stepped in to see what was going on. And then Molly told him the story about Hank and then Frank's engine. And if Frank hadn't have saved us, said Molly, Neville and I would have been quarantined. And Frank really saved our lives this time. Please don't sell him for scrap, sir, said Neville sadly. The Fat Controller smiled. Frank, for a special treat, you will go to the works and have a new engine. Oh, thank you, sir, said Frank, and everyone were happy. And at last, Frank was happy he wasn't scrapped. He was just taken away by Thomas to the diesel works for a new engine. and if it hadn't been for him or for Thomas or for the Fat Controller or Mr. Hawkerdale, both Molly and Neville would have been quarantined and sent for scrap too. But as for Diesel, he had a very uncomfortable friend, and that was Hank.